You just bought a new shirt for your club, 90 pounds, maybe more if you wanted the name on the back. And somewhere in your head, a small voice tells you that money is going to the club, helping them sign players, helping them compete, justifying the price tag, at least a little. Here's the uncomfortable truth. On most replica shirts sold today, the club itself sees somewhere between 3 and 5 pounds of that 90-pound purchase. 3 to 5 pounds out of 90. So where does the rest go? And if the club barely makes anything from the shirt you're wearing, why are kit deals worth hundreds of millions of pounds? That doesn't add up at first glance, but it does once you understand what these deals are actually built around. And the answer has almost nothing to do with how many shirts you personally buy. I'm Chris, and I'm on a mission to make passionate sports fans like you just 1% more informed. Today we're breaking down exactly how kit deals work, what Adidas and Nike are actually paying for, why a club can earn hundreds of millions of pounds from a deal while individually earning almost nothing per shirt sold, and what that tells you about how modern sports brand economics really function. Let's start with the basic structure because most fans assume a kit deal is simple. Brand pays club, brand makes shirts, everyone shares the profit from sales according to how many shirts move. That is not how it works, not even close. A modern kit deal is built around two separate financial components, and understanding the difference between them is the key to understanding the entire industry. The first component is a guaranteed minimum payment. This is a fixed sum the brand pays the club every single year, regardless of how many shirts are sold, regardless of how the team performs, regardless of almost anything. It does not move. It is locked into the contract from day one, often for periods of 8, 10, even 15 years at a time. The second component is a royalty or revenue share on merchandise sales above a certain threshold. This is where things get more complicated, and it's also where the structure genuinely starts to make sense once you see it clearly. Brands typically pay the club a percentage, often somewhere in the range of 10 to 20%, on retail revenue once sales exceed an agreed baseline figure written into the contract. Below that baseline, the club earns nothing extra beyond the guaranteed minimum. Above it, they start taking a cut of every additional pound generated. Here's the part most fans never think about, and it's the single most important detail in this entire video. For the vast majority of clubs in world football, shirt sales never get anywhere close to that revenue share threshold. The guaranteed minimum is the deal, full stop. The percentage clause exists on paper, sitting there in the contract looking meaningful, but it might as well not exist in practice because the sales volume required to trigger it is enormous, and most clubs simply do not move that quantity of replica shirts in a single season, let alone consistently year after year. This is why the size of a kit deal has so little to do with how many shirts a club actually sells in any given season, and almost everything to do with the guaranteed minimum the brand was willing to commit to at the moment the contract was signed. And that number is determined by something else entirely: leverage. Let's talk about leverage, because this is where kit deals start to make real sense and stop feeling like an abstract financial mystery. The guaranteed minimum a brand offers is essentially a bet on exposure value, calculated years in advance. Adidas and Nike are not primarily buying shirt sales when they sign these deals. They're buying a recurring, unmissable 90-minute global advertisement that repeats every few days for an entire season, every single year of the contract. Every match, every highlight clip shared online, every photo taken by fans, every broadcast beamed into living rooms across multiple continents. The club's shirt is the billboard, and the size of that billboard is determined entirely by how many eyes are on it, how often, and under what emotional conditions. This is why the elite clubs command astronomical kit deal values that completely dwarf everything else in the market. A club that plays in the Champions League regularly, that has a global fan base spread across multiple continents and time zones, that generates highlight clips watched by hundreds of millions of people every single week, is offering something no advertising campaign in any other industry can realistically replicate. Continuous, repeated, emotionally charged global visibility, baked into 90 minutes of content that people choose to watch voluntarily and rewatch on their own. There is genuinely no other product on earth that delivers that kind of branded exposure at that frequency and that emotional intensity. Compare that to a mid-table club playing in front of 30,000 people on a wet Tuesday night with limited international broadcast reach and a domestic-only fan base. The shirt is still technically a billboard, but the audience watching it is a fraction of the size, and the emotional intensity around the brand exposure is significantly lower. The guaranteed minimum reflects that gap directly and unforgivingly. There is no sentiment in this calculation. It is pure exposure arithmetic. So when you see headlines about a kit deal worth hundreds of millions of pounds over a decade, what you're actually looking at is a brand calculating the value of sustained, global, emotionally connected visibility, and pricing it accordingly years before a single shirt is printed. The shirt sales themselves are almost a footnote, in that calculation, a secondary mechanism rather than the primary driver of value. Now, I want to pause here because there's a layer to this that most football content never properly gets into. What is the brand actually buying beyond raw visibility? Because exposure alone doesn't fully explain why Nike and Adidas fight so aggressively and spend so much money competing over specific individual clubs. The answer is association. When a brand attaches itself to a club, it is essentially borrowing that club's identity, history, and decades of emotional resonance with millions of people who had nothing to do with building the brand in the first place. A football shirt is one of the most emotionally loaded pieces of clothing that exists anywhere in consumer culture. People don't just wear it casually. They identify with it personally. They pass it down to their children. They wear it to weddings, to funerals, to hospital visits, to the births of their own kids. No other category of merchandise carries that level of personal, generational meaning at that kind of scale. Brands are not just buying advertising space when they sign these contracts. They are buying the right to be permanently associated, for the length of the contract, with an object that means something deeply personal to tens of millions of people across the world. That association is worth an extraordinary amount of money, and it's almost impossible to build from scratch through traditional marketing spend alone. No matter how large the budget, you cannot manufacture 70 or 100 years of fan loyalty through an advertising campaign. You can only attach yourself to loyalty that already exists. This explains something that confuses a lot of fans every single season. Why does a club switch kit, suppliers, and suddenly the new kits feel different, more frequent, more aggressively marketed, more relentlessly promoted across every platform? Once a brand has paid that enormous guaranteed sum for the association, they need to maximize the commercial value of it across every available channel. Which brings us to one of the more genuinely controversial parts of the modern kit industry: kit launch frequency. 20 years ago, clubs released one home kit, one away kit, and occasionally a third kit, often refreshing the full set every 2 seasons rather than every one. Today, almost every major club releases a brand new kit every single year, sometimes with multiple special edition, anniversary, or alternate kits released within the very same season. This is not a coincidence, and it's not really about design innovation either. It's a direct, deliberate commercial strategy. Each new kit release functions as a fresh marketing moment, a new product drop in the language brands actually use internally, a new reason for the brand to dominate social media conversation for a week, generate press coverage across football and fashion media simultaneously, and most importantly, drive a brand new wave of purchases from fans who already own the previous season's version sitting in their wardrobe. The football shirt has essentially become a sneaker-style release cycle, borrowing directly and deliberately from how brands like Nike already operate within their core footwear business. And this is where something fans call leak culture becomes genuinely relevant. Something most fans don't fully realize is at least partially intentional rather than accidental. Kit leaks generate enormous engagement before a kit is even officially released to the public. Speculation, reaction videos, heated debate over the design choices, all of it happening completely for free, generated voluntarily by fans and content creators, months before the brand has spent a single pound on a formal marketing campaign. Some leaks are genuine accidental disclosures. Some are, by most reasonable assessment, very likely strategic. Either way, the commercial effect lands exactly the same. Free attention, free hype, free demand generation, running for weeks before the brand even has to lift a finger. Now let's talk about the clubs operating outside this elite tier entirely, because the economics here are genuinely a different world, almost a different industry altogether. For a lower league club or a mid-table club in a smaller European market, kit deals look almost nothing like what we've just described. Many of these clubs do not have a meaningful global brand relationship at all. Instead, they work with smaller, often regional or specialist sportswear manufacturers on deals that might be worth a few £100,000 a year, sometimes significantly less, sometimes structured as kit supply provided in kind, rather than any significant cash payment changing hands at all. For these clubs, merchandise revenue actually matters in a way it simply does not for the elite tier of the sport. A smaller club genuinely needs fans to physically buy shirts, because without the enormous guaranteed minimums that the biggest global brands offer to the elite clubs, shirt sales revenue forms a meaningful and necessary part of the actual commercial return the club receives. This is essentially the inverse of the situation at the very top of the game, where shirt sales are almost financially irrelevant to the overall value of the contract. It also means smaller clubs have far less room to experiment with aggressive release frequency or premium pricing strategies. Their fan base simply doesn't have the disposable income or the sheer population size to realistically support 5 kit drops in a single season the way a global club's fan base can. So you'll typically see smaller clubs sticking much closer to the traditional model: one home kit, one away kit, longer release cycles measured in years rather than months, because that conservative approach actually matches their genuine commercial reality. Let's bring this back to that 90-pound shirt you bought at the start of this video, because I want to actually break down where that money goes in full, beyond just the club's modest 3 to 5 pounds. Manufacturing cost for a replica shirt is typically somewhere in the range of 5 to 15 pounds, depending heavily on the materials used and the location of production. Retail markup, distribution costs, and the brand's own built-in profit margin account for a genuinely significant chunk of the remaining price you pay at the till. Licensing fees, ongoing marketing spend, and the broader operational cost of running a global retail and e-commerce business also eat substantially into that figure before any profit is realized. The club's guaranteed payment is essentially baked into the brand's overall cost structure from the very start, spread mathematically across millions of units sold globally across every club in their portfolio, not allocated per individual shirt in any simple direct way. What this means practically, and somewhat strangely, is that even if you personally never buy a single shirt from your club for the rest of your life, it makes almost no measurable difference to the overall value of the kit deal itself. The deal was priced years in advance based on projected exposure and brand association, not based on your individual purchasing decision as one consumer among millions, which might feel slightly liberating, knowing your spending isn't propping up the entire system, or slightly depressing, depending entirely on how personally you take your relationship with your club's merchandise. Before we wrap up, I want to give you one of the genuinely stranger details I came across while researching this video. Some kit contracts reportedly include specific clauses around minimum visibility requirements during matches, essentially guaranteeing the brand a certain contractually agreed amount of camera time focused on the shirt logo during live broadcasts, almost like a built-in advertising slot baked directly into the football match itself. It sounds almost absurd when you say it out loud, but it tells you everything you need to know about what these deals are actually built around at their core. Not goodwill, not tradition, not even really shirt sales, camera time. So, where does this entire model go next? The traditional kit deal structure is already starting to show some genuine cracks around the edges. Direct-to-consumer e-commerce means brands increasingly want to sell directly to fans without traditional retail intermediaries taking a cut, which is already starting to change the margin structure we've described throughout this video. Some clubs are reportedly exploring shorter, more flexible kit deals that allow them to renegotiate more aggressively and more frequently as their global commercial value continues to increase year on year. And there's a growing conversation within the industry about whether the traditional kit supplier model will even exist in anything like its current form a decade from now. Some of the world's biggest clubs explore the possibility of building their own in-house apparel operations entirely, cutting out the Adidas and Nike middlemen altogether. The kit on your back, the one you might be wearing right now while watching this, is one of the most quietly sophisticated financial instruments in modern football. It looks like simple merchandise sitting on a shop shelf. It functions like a global advertising contract with built-in emotional leverage that genuinely no other industry on earth can replicate, priced years in advance, locked in for over a decade, and almost entirely disconnected from how many shirts actually get sold. I'm Chris. Thank you for watching. And if you're not subscribed yet, please do. This is exactly what I make every single month.